All right, so following up on the great quiz show that you've just seen, I want to start with a question, which is, how many of you have seen the Channel 4 documentary called The Romanians Are Coming? Well, I'm one of the Romanians. And so before I start my presentation, I decided what better thing to do than tell you the only 3 things you need to know about Romania. Number one, and before I show you these are ads that were created by a Romanian publication inviting British people to visit Romania because it's so great. Number one, all women look like Kate, or half of them, and the other half like her sister. This is true for the guys who've been there, you can confirm. Number two, we speak better English than anywhere you've been in France, which, to be honest, isn't that difficult. And number three, our draft beer is less expensive than your bottled water. So what better place to visit than one with good-looking people who can speak English while you're drinking cheap beer? So, as Guy briefly mentioned, my name is Emi Gal. I run a company called Brainient, and we're Europe's leading interactive video platform, helping agencies create and deliver interactive video ads across any device. But that's not what I want to talk about, but I wanted to get it out the way. But what I also do is I run experiments. So every year, I choose a new thing that I do for a year, and I commit to it. So 1 year, I slept 2.5 hours a day for 2 months in a polyphasic sleeping experiment where I slept 1.5 hours during the night and then 20 minutes every 6 hours. Another year, I read a book a week, which was pretty amazing. And last year, I trained my memory with a world memory champion to be able to remember anything I want to. And while doing these experiments, particularly the one where I read a book a week, I became really, really interested in a particular topic, which is nanotechnology. And that's technology that's a billionth of a meter in size. And there's this great essay written by Richard Feynman, who was one of the greatest physicists of the past 100 years, called There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom. And his theory was that if you could take matter, what we're made of, as you know, everything is made of matter. If we take matter and find a way to organize it atom by atom, we could, in theory, take the entire Encyclopedia Britannica and print it on the tip of a needle, right? And being a physicist and a very good one and a genius, you know, a lot of people spent a lot of time seeing if this is possible. And as it turns out, it is. So I've started thinking about nanotechnology and how this will impact the future, because my favorite cartoon when I was a kid was this. So I figured, how will nanotechnology influence the next 40, 50 years, and how will we live as individuals in, say, 2045? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to picture we're in 2045 and wake up in the morning and see how technology will influence our lives based on things that we can see today that we can extrapolate in the future and see where we'll get to. So number one, you're 2045, you wake up at 7 a.m., what do? The first thing, obviously, you take your iPhone 10 and you start swiping through your news feeds and Instagrams and all of that, right? Well, I would argue that in the future, we're not going to use a piece of glass that we stare at in order to interact with technology. We're just going to speak to technology. And there's a movie that came out last year called Her that portrayed this in a really, really good way, I think. And I want to show you a short video of that movie.
How would you describe your relationship with your mother? Thank you. Please wait as your operating system is initiated.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Samantha.
So, I don't know how many of you have seen the movie, but basically it's about this guy in the future who interacts with his very own operating system, and all his interactions with technology happen via speaking to it rather than playing with a piece of glass. And this sounds a little bit far-fetched, and it sounds a little bit cuckoo and out there, and it is. However, we already have a glimpse of what that will look like, and that's Siri. And Siri is a little bit dumb these days, but she's witty, or he, depending on what you prefer calling it. But it shows really, really well what technology could become. And if you're thinking, well, yeah, it's dumb and it's never going to get really, really smart, there's a graph that proves you wrong. There's this guy who founded Intel, which you may have heard of, called Gordon Moore. And he came out with this theory back in the 70s called Moore's Law, which is that technology doubles its processing power every 2 years. So if you count from 1 to 40 in a linear way, when you're at the 40th steps, you're at 40, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 40. If you count 1 to 40 exponentially, you do 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. When you're at 40, you're at 1 trillion. So he mapped this on a graph and he said, well, I estimate that in 2045, we will get to the point where we could essentially recreate the human brain using technology. When we get to that point, we have artificial intelligence, therefore we have computers we can speak to. This is trend number 1. Number 2, what do? You wake up, you speak to your computer, and then you need to eat. And what better thing to eat than a British breakfast, right? Well, I would argue that in the future, you won't just pick up some food from the fridge and eat. You will know exactly what your body needs by ingesting a little pill that tells you exactly what nutrients you need. And again, this sounds a little bit crazy, but there's a company in Japan called Sakoya. And what they do is they've created this little pill that you ingest, and it takes 360-degree photographs of your intestines and tells you whether you're healthy or not. And even more importantly, it transfers all that data to your phone wirelessly. So we already have technology if you want to see photos of your intestine on your phone, that is. So we already have the technology. It's live. It's there. We just need to put different sensors in it. So I think in the future, we'll be taking a pill in the morning. It will tell us exactly what we need to eat. And that's pretty awesome. So then you have a problem, right? You need to open the fridge and you need to have exactly that food. And this is something that's been talked about today, the next one, which is that I think everything will be connected. All your devices, all the devices that you would never think about being connected right now, like your fridge, right? I think in the future, Amazon will be connected to your very own operating system. It will tell it what you need to have in the fridge. It will be shipped. You'll get into your fridge, so everything's connected. You don't need to do anything anymore. You're being taken care of. So next one. What do you do after you eat? And so you go to work. How do you go to work? Well, many people drive. And this is actually a photo from outside London coming into London. And this is what it looks like many, many days. But I think in the future, we won't be driving cars. And this is, I think, something that everyone expects. But I want to share some data. Google just announced that they've driven over 1 million miles on the streets of California without a human touching the car. And during those 1 million miles, they had 11 incidents, minor incidents, all caused by humans. So they concluded that Google cars are smarter than humans. And that was the title of the article they put out. Number 2, Audi had a car driving from San Francisco to New York, 3,500 miles autonomously, including stopping at a gas station, which I find is pretty amazing. And Volvo has driverless cars in Europe, in Spain, being tested. So I don't know about you, but it's not even 9 a.m., and I'm pretty excited about the future. So the next ones get a little bit more out there. So let's say it's 11 a.m., right? And you go to work, and there's a really complicated problem that you need to solve. And the way I see it, the human brain is an amazing algorithm, software algorithm, that's running on a poor machine designed like 1 billion years ago. And the reason I say that is because the human brain has the ability to function in parallel, right? When you think about something, you have blocks of neurons, we have 300 million of them, that can activate at the same time. However, these neurons are running, the software is running on the neocortex, which is kind of not a great device from a hardware perspective. So there's this guy called Ray Kurzweil, and he is a scientist, he's the director of engineering at Google, and he also predicts the future. So he predicted when the internet will become mainstream, he predicted when the self-driving cars will become technologically feasible, and a number of other things. And he has this theory, which is that in the future, we'll be able to inject little nanobots into the bloodstream, and then if we need more computing power, we'll just buy it in the same way we buy Amazon Web Services today. And in that way, we'll be able to supercharge our brain capacity. Now, this sounds completely crazy, right? And when I saw his TED Talk and read about it, I was like, yeah, dude, whatever. But I started reading a little bit about it. And I'm sure you've all heard of DNA, right? DNA is the genetic material that we're built of, or that describes what we are as individuals or as objects or as animals. And as it turns out, you can use DNA to actually create computers that self-assemble themselves. So not only you can use DNA as the genetic material, you can use it essentially as a programming language. And you can have it program itself to do whatever you want, to turn into any kind of nanobot you want. And there are a number of scientists in the US that have created these little nanobots that are molecular size, so they're smaller than 100 nanometers. And a nanometer, I'll remind you, it's a billionth of a meter in size. And they can inject these little nanobots into the bloodstream containing a particular chemotherapy drug, and it will go and find cancer cells and kill them. So to a degree, the technology is there, so it's not far-fetched that exponentially it will grow over the next 40, 50 years, and we'll be able to insert these nanobots in our bloodstream and do all kinds of amazing things, as you'll see towards the end of the presentation. It's 1 p.m., so what do you do after working hard? You have lunch, and you watch cats playing ping pong on YouTube, right? That's what I do at lunchtime. I don't know about you guys. But I think the future is a bit more exciting than that when it comes to entertainment. And there are two companies that I want to talk to you about. One of them is called DJI. And it's a Chinese company that creates drones that have HD cameras that can stream live video. Pretty straightforward, simple technology. There's another company that Facebook bought for $2 billion called Oculus Rift. And basically, it's a virtual reality. You put a thing on your eyes, and they create these spaces where you can look up and down, and it feels real. So in the future, if you want to visit the Vatican, instead of going in person, why not during your lunchtime, you can rent a drone from Rome, put on your Oculus Rift, and fly to the Vatican, right? There's no reason why that wouldn't happen, and the technology is already there. It's just someone needs to put it together. All right, so it's 6 p.m., and you've had a long day at work, so on your way home, you want to go and buy some clothes, right? So you walk into H&M, or, I don't know, Louis Vuitton, if you're Paul Wright over there, and you're serviced by people right now. But I think in the future, we'll be serviced by robots. Robots that will know exactly what you want, know exactly about you, everything about you, will always be friendly, which isn't the case with many people in shops today. And as crazy as this sounds, in July this year, there's a hotel in Japan being launched called Henna, which means strange, strangely enough, that will be autonomously and fully serviced by robots. So when you go there, you're being greeted by robots. They take your dry cleaning or whatever, and it's being cleaned by robots, so everything is going to be done by robots. And we're going to see this in cars, in the hospitality industry, hotels, and so on. All right, so you've had a long day, and you've learned a lot, and you want to back up your brain just in case. So right now, you don't really have an easy way to do that, but you have an easy way to back up your computer. So it's stupid that you shouldn't be able to back up your brain. So Ray Kurzweil, again, wrote a book called Singularity is Near. And his theory is that if technology progresses as it currently does, we'll get to the singularity point. Singularity point is a moment in time when technology will be so advanced that we will be able to essentially recreate the human brain, recreate the neocortex, in which case you could essentially transport the brain, the human brain, and put it into a machine, including its consciousness, if you believe that consciousness is dictated by the brain as well. So I really believe that in the future, probably 2050 or so, should you want to, you'll be able to extend human life indefinitely as an individual by transporting your brain and your consciousness into the cloud. And then you can connect those clouds. It becomes really amazing. But we've gotten so far. We've gone through 8 ideas at various degrees of craziness with some scientific backing. But we haven't spoken about sex, which I think is not good. So if you look at the human body and the brain, everything in the brain is an electrical stimulus, right? So we have nerves going through us, and these nerves send tiny electrical signals into a particular pattern in the brain. And there's this surgery, very famous surgery that became pretty famous, open brain surgery, a couple of years ago, or a year ago, where a team of scientists were operating on an open brain on a little girl. And you can operate on an open brain because the brain doesn't have pain receptors. And they were sending tiny electrical signals into various areas of her brain to see what happens. And this was a pretty messy situation, right? There was blood everywhere. She had her scalp open and so on. But they touched the particular pattern, and she started laughing hysterically for like 10 minutes. And she couldn't stop because it was stimulated by the exact pattern in her brain that was responsible with laughter. So then they kind of developed that observation, and they figured out that in the brain, everything is a pattern. And if you stimulate the right pattern, you can basically make people believe that they're in a certain place or that something particular is happening to them. So if you find the pattern for, stimulating orgasm, like see what nerves go to what place, in theory, you could have those nanobots in the bloodstream that we inserted earlier go and trigger a particular pattern. Boom, you have on-demand orgasms ordered online, which is pretty amazing. And so it's 10 p.m. We've had a great day, and we have one more thing to do, which is we go to bed. And, what do you do? I don't know what you do, but when I go to bed, I generally watch a video. And I think that what will happen in the future is that the Minority Report from Tom Cruise's kind of movie will become reality. We will be able to touch and interact and engage with, and yes, this is self-promotion. Yeah, you're getting that. So I think this is already happening. Like, you can interact and engage with videos. So this is an example of an ad we created at Brainient where you could interact with the ad using your hands on an Xbox machine with Kinect. So you can swipe through the content, you can interact, you can engage while you're watching it. And I don't know about you, but I'm very, very excited about the future. And if you want to know more crazy ideas, I'll be around for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.